Today's video, all about the Firecuda 530. A lot of data to back up the claims as one of the best drives on the market. Welcome back to another video. My name is Nikos. Today we're talking about the Firecuda 530, a super fast drive that a lot of people have been asking me to do a review. I finally saw it on sale. I picked it up to test it out, and I gotta tell you, I'm impressed. Now, everybody's been asking, well, we saw your videos on all the other drives, and we want a review on this. We want to see what you think about this, especially for creators, for workflow. So this video is all about the data, and it's all about looking at what can this drive do. Of course, looking at the issues that caching can present in any drive. And in the case of the previous drives, which I'll link all the videos below, I ended up going with the SN850 over the Rocket, over the Samsung 980 Pro. So I did all my tests and I realized, hey, the SN850 is the drive to go with because of the lack of caching issues. At the same time, that drive is hot and people will be like, whoa, it's so hot. But even with the heating issues, you don't see a big issue with the transfer speeds and the functionality of the drive. I will do another review on the long term of those drives. I do have two 1 terabytes and one 2 terabyte drive, so do hit subscribe, and I will be leaving the link down below when I do make that video so you can watch that. Now, I haven't been disappointed. I haven't seen big issues. It has been great. The deal with this drive, it's one of the fastest on the market. It is awesome, and I looked at it and I will be giving a kind of a recommendation of what you should be thinking in purchasing this drive, or the 4 terabyte drive, or the 1 terabyte drive, really, after I show you all the data. Now, the idea with this drive is that it's super quick, it's super fast, and it's one of the fastest on the market. The pros to this is that when I put it in, it was just kind of like, wow, it's actually getting close to the markers of what they said this can perform at, which is awesome. You don't usually see that with most drives. At the same time, the idea of switching this from the CPU lane to the PCIe lane and still seeing it up there is awesome. Like, I was so impressed. And then, it got me thinking about, well, is it the chipset, the issue? Is it really the motherboard issue and the manufacturers that make the motherboards? Or is it the drives where their drivers are performing at what level with each specific company? So the thought process that this has taken me in is, all right, what is the opportunity for anybody who's purchasing this drive? If you're just going to be using it on a regular, this is a great drive. It's going to be faster than all the other drives. And of course, you're going to be getting the benefit of a real good sustained drive that doesn't overheat too much. So if you put it into a heatsink as well, you won't have any issues with the heating unless you're overworking this. So on a regular, you won't have any issues and you'll have a really quick drive. Now, for gamers and of course, regular enthusiasts of systems, and they want like the fastest, and they don't do that much with the computers, this does the trick. You won't have any issues with it. Now, for gamers, I always get this question, will it make the games load faster? No, it won't. It'll be fractional. Like, nothing's really efficient with Gen 4. This is what we have to remember. Softwares are not efficient. So if you are a creator and you're trying to find a faster drive for a Premiere Pro or what have you, unless the software is being more optimized, which we're seeing it more and more with Gen 4, you're not going to see the benefits go like through the roof. It's going to be, incremental. So don't be like, I'm going to go get this fast drive and my life's going to change. It's not. For most software, it won't change, and that goes for all types of gaming as well. What's the benefit of this? Well, it's faster in all aspects of the drive, from the sequential to the random reads and all the different specifics of the drive when you're using different types of software and different types of transfers. So the idea here is that this is a good quality drive, but the price point I think is a little bit too high, in my opinion, for what you're getting. I don't see it that much benefit, but we'll talk about more of it towards the end of the video when we talk about the recommendation. At the same time, this is what I see and how I see things when I'm looking at something like this. What is my workflow? And this is the most critical part. So if you're a gamer, listen tight to the caching issue, but and listen to how it's going to affect you. Now, the idea of caching is where you need to look at it from a business standpoint, from an investment standpoint, from a perspective of what your workflow is doing. If you have this drive, there's going to be this issue that's going to occur where you're going to load it. And if you load it too high, so past 75%, I got it up to 90%. The first couple times around when I tested this, I was like, oh, there's no caching issue. The SN850 doesn't have a caching issue when the drive goes over 90%. I can leave it there for weeks. There won't be an issue. It doesn't slow down the drive. And this showed the same. It didn't have an issue. However, when I left it on the computer for 3 days, 5 days, 10 days, I saw the issue. It popped up, it came up, and all of a sudden the drive is operating at a snail pace. And I was like, oh, great. Until I removed the data, it was just operating very slow. I had to bring it down to 75%, 70 to 75%, and then this was working back to normal. So that is kind of something you have to think about. So if you have a 1 terabyte drive, then you can't go past 750 gigabytes. I'm assuming the 1 terabyte will work like the 2 terabyte, and you got to think about that stuff, and you got to say to yourself, okay, how much data can I use? So I wouldn't go past like 1300, 1400 megabytes on gigabytes on this 2 terabyte drive. Now, that's after use of this being in your system and you writing on and off and so on and so forth. Now, if you're thinking about it in terms of caching and how does caching really work, different systems will exist where it allows the manufacturers to create the firmware, and I won't get into the technicals, but they'll make the drives a little bit different. So what you see with something like the SN850, the idea of how cache is structured, and you can see it fluctuating. So it's trying to move data, and the caching just keeps going up and down as it moves along. So that idea would be that you have a slower rate of transfer. It allows the drive to work faster by loading and unloading that caching. And at the same time, the Firecuda, what it's doing is it's moving along, and then it drops around 300 to 400 gigabytes. It will drop, and then it just kind of glides for a bit, and then it'll pick up again. And then it's basically doing it in chunks where it's releasing the cache. So the idea then becomes, well, what's more efficient? And I think because of the speed, this might be a more efficient way. However, if you're using the same drives, so not two different manufacturers like the SN850 and the 530, then you won't really notice that big of a deal with it when you're moving large data, because you're going to see how the drive is operating. You won't see big issues. But if you're moving back and forth from the two drives, you would see the difference, because this, when the caching goes, and it's basically on its low point and it's waiting to release the cache, you're literally sitting there and watching it go about 1.6 gigabytes per second. However, the SN850, this falls down to like 950, 980, 1.1 in gigabytes per second. And basically you're just kind of seeing it there. So you'll see this different. You're like, which drive is having the issue? Now, the other issue that I found with this, it's the heating issue. And the heating issue is that this will overheat. Now, if you're overdoing it, this will overheat. It'll spike to 72 degrees, and you're sitting there going, oh, okay, so I saw 74 as the highest. The idea then becomes, well, what's going on? When you're moving a lot of data onto it and you're taking breaks, you will see that it will start to cool down, but it won't cool down automatically, and then you'll start the next phase of it. The caching is doing its thing, and then it'll pick up again, and then you'll come back down to a regular rate. The thought process then becomes, well, how does it fit the narrative of caching? Well, there's two things here. When the heating starts to pick up, the idea is that it becomes unstable, and then you're kind of sitting there going, okay, what's actually happening with the instability? You'll see the instability. Sometimes it'll be working super fast, and sometimes it won't, all based on how the caching is happening. If you're moving a lot of data, then yeah, you're going to see that instability occurring at random times. However, if you're not moving a lot of data and you're sticking around 300-400, right at that threshold where I saw the drop, after I ran the test, what I would see is that it would literally take like 5 minutes for it to reset the cache, and your drive is moving back to full speed again. However, after 3, 4, 5 days of continually using the drive, it would take around 40 minutes or half an hour to 40 minutes for this drive to get the speeds back up to normal. And this is something that is a cause for concern, of course, if you're using this drive on a regular and you're moving a lot of data to it. The interesting thing here is that when you're using something like the Canon R5, the CF Express card, I'm moving the data onto the computer through a 10 gigabit speed connection, and the actual reader is only reading in at 580 megabytes per second. So that speed is too slow to affect the cache big time, and the cache has time to recover. So basically, when you're done with it, it takes like 5 minutes, 3 minutes. Like, it's almost instantaneously. When I ran the test, by the second, like I ran the first test and I ran the second test, and it was like back to normal. So the speed rate, that's affecting how this works, but then the heat comes into play. The other side, I noticed it, that when I was writing back to the SN850, this spiked for some reason in heat. And all of a sudden, when it was moving everything over, I see this jump, and I couldn't figure out why this jump was happening with this specific set of data. And it was just by the amount of data that was being moved over, and it just hit a certain, threshold, and then this thing would heat up and I would see the spike. But then when I went back and did the test differently, so I can erase everything and give the cache a chance, and give the drive a chance to just cool down just a fraction, smidgen you would say, then I wouldn't see that problem present itself. So in this data, I'm going to be walking you through all these things so you can see, hey, what's the reality of it? What did I see? How does this fit the narrative? And that will be helping you make a better decision of what is your workflow? How does your workflow work? And then from there, from the workflow, you can say to yourself, all right, is this the drive for me? Or, hey, let me go check out the SN850 more detailed videos that I have below, and maybe I can make a better decision on which drives I should buy. Now, again, there is the price point aspect of it, and you got to take a whole bunch of things into consideration with your budget, but these are the things that we got to be looking at so we can make a better decision with what we're buying with our workflow. So let's get into the data.
Before starting, I wanted to make sure it's clear. The idea of this testing is in line with a creator and workflow. A person that is a professional that's moving a lot of data, and they want to make sure that they've picked the right drive for the job. I am doing tests with 560 gigabytes, 1.12 terabytes, and 1.68 terabytes here in these transfers. And of course, they are being done in terms of moving from the SN850 to the Firecuda and back. And you'll see this bottom top reference to these slides. Now, the reference of top would be that the positioning of the SN850 is in the top slot, the M.2 drive slot. So this would be a CPU lane, and then the bottom would be the PCIe lane. So what will happen here? When we're moving the set of data, the first 560 gigabytes, it is equivalent. Like, we're seeing a nice movement, and I can't complain at all with this. This is within average of what we should be expecting. And yes, when we write to the SN50 and it's at the bottom, it should, on the PCIe lane here, be slower. And it's not that significant. Now, there was an outlier when we went to the second set of datas, where we transferred another set of 560 gigabytes. We got up to 1.12 terabytes and then to 1.68 terabytes. And for some reason, when we're writing to the Firecuda, this popped up. Now, the idea here is it's on averages, and the average was, in and around here. So I couldn't understand why I was able to repeat that. Now, the rest of them came fine. I didn't find that issue again. And that's something to think about. When we're looking at no pause, and I'm just transferring 1.12 terabytes right over, we see that the fastest movement is with the Firecuda in the CPU lane slot, and it is the fastest there. It's super fast, can't complain. Now, when we are looking at it and the difference of transferring that much data to the Firecuda where it is in the PCIe lanes, there is a significant difference there in how much time this is taking to move. So this is something to be thinking about, but in the grand scheme of things, that timeline is not that bad compared to what we've seen with other drives. When we're looking at it in terms of the thought process to write to the SN850, there isn't much of a difference whether you're on the top or the bottom. And a lot of that has to do with the idea that you're not going to get to the top speed for transfer. You're literally going to be hitting in and around of topping around 3 gigabytes per second. So on average, it's going to be around 2.6. And then when the drives start to experiencing caching issues, or they're going through their cycles with the caching, you're going to literally see them come down to like 1.6 gigabytes per second. So you're never actually going to see these hit on a transfer hit more than 3. At least I haven't seen that yet. When we're looking at it in terms of the idea of testing all these drives, now, as you can see here, there's a lot of tests being done, and I've included in here the Gen 3 drive, so the 970 EVO. I wanted to include this in here because I did want to show the idea that when you're moving like 45 gigabytes of a shoot, you're not seeing such a significant difference. The significant difference starts to play out when you jump into higher numbers like 90 gigabytes and you start to see an increase of time. or when we jump into something like B-roll and then we jump into randomness. When we get to randomness, we do see an increase. That is significant. And when you're talking about like a good like 20 seconds there, it is the idea that you're going to moving random files, 46 gigabytes of random files in these days, you know, that's not that much, right? Like, so depending on what you're moving, and say you're doing some project and you have a whole bunch of random files, this will be significant. And where it's more pronounced significant is when we're looking at the bigger files going over 90 gigabytes, and you can see this just skyrocket. So, I mean, you can look at this in different ways and you can address this in different ways, but this is the Gen 3 and Gen 4 working together. So if you have one of the new PCs and you're going, should I buy a Gen 4 drive, and am I going to be using only one drive? When you're doing transfers, you will see this. Now, again, how many times are you going to transfer? That's the question. You know, if you're looking at this data right now and you're saying from a Gen 3 perspective, you know, should I be using one, and how much of an effect will it be? Well, if you're transferring stuff on a daily, you're going to see an improvement by going to a Gen 4. But if you are not, and you're transferring maybe once a week, then it's not going to be that big of an issue. Now, the other outlier here was this transfer speed, and this was a Firecuda to the SN850. 2 terabyte, and this is where kind of like concerns started to play out. So what I did was remove that Gen 3 drive, and now we can see a clear issue here with the photos and video with a 4K big 168 gigabyte folder, and we see this issue pop up, and we're like, what's going on there? Now the commonality here as we get into the bigger files is, and the random files here, and then the bigger files here, is that the 1 terabytes, whether it's a 980 Pro or the SN850, is a little bit slower. So, you know, the bigger drives do have more caching and so on. So they're operating a little bit differently. So that is the benefit of going with a 2 terabyte. Now, when we take out those 980, the 980 drive and the SN850 1 terabyte, and we just focus on the 2 terabytes transferring to each other, we now can clearly see the issue here with the bigger folder. The rest are coming within line. Now, we did have this like quick 33.5 seconds to move the random 46 gigabytes. This was going to the SN850, and this was when the SN850 was on the top. So you're looking at this number now and you're saying, okay, so for certain times this is working way faster. And you're putting into perspective that if you're to compare the idea of writing to a drive, would you want the slower SN850 on the PCIe lane or the CPU lane? And that's what I'm trying to figure out here by doing the top and bottom tests. When I flip this so I can see it a little bit better, and then I start to remove more of the information, I'm just focused here on the top versus bottom slot. You can see that the differences are kind of negligible on day-to-day stuff. When you get into the random folder or files, you're going to see that, you know, it's better to have it on top. And then we have this, again, outlier that starts to occur. So we're going to address that in a sec. Again, the writing to the Firecuda, we do the kind of same test here, and we can see that the numbers are pretty close. Like, there isn't that much of a difference, and that is because the Firecuda is operating at a high level, at a high speed on the PCIe lanes, where the SN850 is not. Here we do find a little bit of a difference, of course. So, and that this is following in line to previous numbers. So we're going to analyze that, and what we do is we go, well, why is that happening? Let's do our first test with rest. So I'm going to move the different folders. I'm going to give the drives some downtime to cool them down, and then I'm going to run the transfers again, and we see that the equivalency is even tighter here, especially in the 168 gigabyte transfer here. So this is nice. And you're looking at this now and you're saying, well, what am I going to be doing on a daily? And I'm showing you these numbers so that you can make a decision for yourself. This isn't me to tell you which one is the best drive. This is for me to tell you, hey, what's your workflow? And then look at this. So if you're just constantly doing 4K shoots with 45 gigabytes or 90 gigabytes, there isn't that much of a difference in these drives, whether you put them on the top or the bottom, and there's not much difference overall between these two drives when they're working. So looking at this and saying to yourself, let me compare that. Say I have a, if I go for the SN850 1 terabyte or the 2 terabyte, and then
go for another drive of the Firecuda, this would be kind of your scenario. And if you compare it to just doing straight up SN850s, you saw in the previous slide, until we get to the bigger numbers, you're not having an issue with the SN850s. You like, yeah, they slowed down eventually, but that was because it was 1 terabyte. But with the 2 terabyte, they're playing an equivalency. Now, when I look at these numbers again and I rearrange them, I want to see just more specifics of what's going on and where should I be placing these on the CPU versus the PCIe lane. And I do see some differences here, but again, they're plus minus, they're minute, they're not that big of a difference. And this one, like, I'm really just here just comparing writing and reading to the SN850 when it's on the top, and when it's on the CPU lane, and then when it's on the PCIe lane, and what is occurring there altogether. So we are seeing a difference here, and we are seeing that based on what you use your drive the most for, you should be placing this drive in. That's it. You can't win all of them. I think that's what we're getting out of this. Now, what I'm seeing here again is that it's a 5-to-1 on the right, and then the read is 1-to-5 when we compare the two drives. So it's like a wash. And in the different scenarios, you're going to look at this and you're going to say, well, what is again the best overall for most things, and then what is best for me and what I'm using it. But again, this is negligible. So when people are arguing about this, I'm finding it's negligible, and I'm not finding that big of a difference. Now, there's something to be said in terms of, hey, should I just, like, because I want to use this drive to edit faster because I think it's going to be a faster drive. Again, I've shown in previous videos that it does not matter because Premiere Pro, for instance, does not take advantage of a fast drive. It's just, it doesn't. Again, that's the view on that. So now let's analyze hot versus cold, because we got to figure out why that spike is occurring. And in the original one, so without taking a break, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, all right, so what's occurring with the Firecuda versus the SN850? I heat up the SN850 for these tests, and I keep everything else cold, and I'm doing a test between hot and cold, and we can see that whenever I did the test, there was no significant difference. These are spot on. So the SN850 operates at a like a very hot level, but as long as you're cooling it down and you have it in a heatsink, you're good to go. I have it in one of these Rockets heat sinks, and it doesn't have an issue. It's just doing nice, nice job. It gets hotter than anything else, around 80 some degrees, but it doesn't throttle. It doesn't have any issues. It operates great. I haven't had an issue with it. Now, let's look at the issues. And this is when the Firecuda gets hot. When the Firecuda gets hot, we do have these instabilities that are occurring. And this is where we saw these issues that were occurring. Now, granted, the drive doesn't go past, 72 to 74 degrees. Like, I've seen it go to 74 degrees. So, but usually it is maxing out at 72 degrees. So this idea here is what we were seeing in that first spike of slides. So we're looking at this and we're saying, well, how does this fit the narrative of overall what we're doing with this drive? And how does it fit the narrative based on the big transfers? When it heats up, if it's doing a big, long transfer, it's almost like it's regulating everything with the caching, from what I've seen. But there is going to be the instability. So in a few times, you're going to see it react the way you don't expect it to react. So when we compare this drive again, this is where we see this spike occurring. And you sit there and you wonder why this is happening on the transfer. I've ran these tests several times and I've tried different things, and these are like, we're seeing a similar pattern. That is 100%. So when you're seeing this similar pattern, you have to ask yourself, okay, what is the goal then for me as a person who's going to be using this kind of drive for these kind of things? Again, comparing this to the 980 Pro and also the SN850, which are 1 terabyte drives, we do see a little bit of a hiccup here as well. And of course, I have the review for that video, so you can see why the 980 is not with me anymore. But overall, like, those caching issues have been fixed. Apparently, I haven't had the drive to test it, but you can see that with the 1 terabyte drive, you are within that area of error. So I mean,
at the end of the day, the question just becomes, when we see this outlier, what's going to happen? And this is, of course, the idea of this big transfers happening and how it's regulating its caching and how that caching will work. And I think this is where we saw this issue here. This is where this heating and the sporadic differences in times to get things moved over is due to the heating and the caching operating in a way where at that time it was like it's not like it's constant, right? There's instability to this, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, based on how the computer is treating and using it. And we did see this spike, and I'm seeing it when it was that the Firecuda was in the CPU lane. So take this based on what we're saying and ask yourself, what is it that I'm going to see when I'm using it? And if I do see it, is this what I want to consider a good drive for me? By analyzing crystal disk mark, we can now start to put everything into perspective and look at the numbers based on how things are being transferred. So this is what the Firecuda looks like when it is in the CPU Gen 4 drive. And this is basically top speeds. You're not going to find something faster. It's just like top speed, amazing. Okay. When we compare this into the PCIe Lane M.2 slots, what you see here is a slowdown, and this is normal. You're going to see the slowdown, but it's much better than what we see with the Gen 4 drives that the other ones that we tested. Now, this is on average what I've been seeing since, like, doing these tests on this. It's been around 6,200, so we're going to see this in later images as well. So when I move on the 35% capacity, the 648 gigabytes, we do see this slowdown. And this slowdown is going to happen with every drive. You're going to see a little bit of a dip. And the question is, how long does it take to recover? Now, this, I ran the test, and then I ran it again, and we can see the recovery there. So again, we're in the PCIe lane here, and this is your recovery. Perfect. This is what I want to see. I want to see this drive recover quickly, and we saw that in the data before, and now we're seeing it here. When we throw in another 600 gigabytes, we go up to 1.2 terabytes. This is where we see the dip. Now, the more data you put on, the more of a dip you're going to see, and the longer it's going to take for the caching to recover. Now, my goal is to make sure that I have the best drive for this, because I'm using my drives on a daily to move data. Now, you're going to say to me, this is still fast, Nico. Like, this is still fast. And yeah, that might be true. However, the idea becomes, how long does it take to recover back to what the drive should be doing? And we can see it here. I do more tests, and it's just taking forever. And you can see this go up to like 40 minutes to 45 minutes before it starts to replenish this idea of caching and bring it back up, so the recovery happens and it brings it back up to normal speed levels. On the other hand, you got to remember that the way the caching works is different from other drives, so we got to put that into perspective. Once I remove the data that I just transferred on, I do see this bump up right away. And that's noticeable. It's right there, and it starts to move right away. So this is something to think about when you're looking at your testing, when you're looking at the drive you have, and what is it that you truly need, and if this really does bother you. For me, it just, it bothers me from a perspective of knowing it does it, but in real world, you're not seeing that effect with your operating, daily operational aspects with your workflow. Regarding the G drive, which would be here the SN850, I moved about 600 gigabytes here, 567, and we see that there's no difference in the data. It's just solid. Okay, there will be moments where the SN850 will dip, but on average, it comes back rather quickly, and we don't have any complaints. Okay? And after doing several tests, you see that, hey, it's back. Now, when you're looking at these numbers and you're saying to yourself, well, what happens if we add another, 600 gigabytes, you could get over a terabyte? Again, there is like nothing noticeable here, right? Like that's significant. This is still pumping. And this is why I like this drive. This is why the SN850 is what I like. Now, again, there is the aspect of looking at it and saying, okay, how long will this take to recover, and how will this look? And if we're looking at it in terms of it crashing, and usually it is within that realm of 5 minutes to 10 minutes when we get over that terabyte. So here it is at 86%, and you can see that it's still pumping away. Okay. And when I say it's still pumping away, it's still moving and it's at 86%. Now, in contrast, when you're looking at it in terms of the idea of the Firecuda 530 over 70 some percent, there is a slowdown and it just doesn't operate. The SN850 can operate. I've had this thing at 90 some percent and it's still pumping, you know, and yes, you're not supposed to do that. I understand that. I know that. But we're human and we're going to do that. I know you're going to do it. I know I'm going to do it. So it's worth putting it up here. So I know I'm going to see the comments below. Well, you shouldn't load your drive up to that. Well, yeah, you know what, buddy? Yeah, everybody does it. Okay. Why? Because when you're moving data and you need space and you need to move it on there, what are you going to do? Not put it on there? Like, you know, you have no choice. Come on. So, and this is significant for me personally. When I'm looking at my drives, I'm looking at it and saying, well, what happened with the Firecuda? Well, over 70%, and it was like specifically over 75. After 3 days, it just was down to 3,000 megabytes per second here. So where the SN850, it can just go on. I don't have any issues. This is what I'm finding. I'm hoping I can see other people compared down below so we can see, you know, what's the pattern in all these drives. Now, again, the concern is with the heat, and I have done the Firecuda 530 tests without the heatsink, but I picked up the one with the heatsink. So I'm going to be doing the test there to see, is there a true difference with the heatsink? Will they make a difference? Somebody noted this to me and I thought, you know, it's worth kind of analyzing and looking at it and saying, you know, why not? Like, let's test it out. And at the end of the day, why not buy? It was on sale for the same amount of money. And I was like, oh, steal. Oh, like, I'm going to go buy it, test it out. So I will be doing similar tests just to see the comparison. They're going to be not full tests like what I've been doing here. I'm going to do basic tests to see if the heating issue is going to happen, specifically repeating those other ones, and see where it goes. So, so do hit subscribe so you can see those videos. And of course, hit the like so, you know, we can get, you know, this algorithm helping us here. So as you can see from the stats, this is a good drive. Now, one thing I didn't mention before, this is a dual-sided drive. So there's chips on both sides. So you got to put that into perspective when you're using one of these drives. This is the 2 terabyte. I think the 1 terabyte is just one-sided. So the idea here is recommendations. And people will always ask me, hey, what should I buy due to my circumstance? Everybody's got a different circumstance. You got to look at this based on A, budget, B, workflow, C, need versus want. Now, I'm going to look at it in terms of gamers and get them out of the way. This is the drives, the type of drives you should be going over the SN850. This is a cooler drive than the SN850. However, this is still spicy hot. It does get hot. You need to cool it down. You do need to have a heatsink on it and thermal pads, and it will keep everything good. So do not put this in there and expect it to not throttle if you don't have the good cooling technique in there. So for gamers, I would go for a 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte, but remember that you can't be loading all your games all at once and then expect this to work right away. And if you're over that 75% threshold, it might work fine at the beginning, but then you'll see a slowdown and you're going to be wondering what's going on. Why am I finding slowdowns? Now, if you are looking at now as the professionals, the creators, everybody else who is building a rig and or wants something fast for their laptop, this is the one to go for. And you got to look at it in terms of your workflow. What is your budget? And ask yourself, is this worth it? Now, this is coming in about $100 more than the SN850. The SN850 is an awesome drive. And you know, from a perspective of where you want to be, if you're going to buy multiple drives, you want to put that into perspective for the budget. And the SN850s, I've seen them go on sale quite a bit. So, I mean, you will find deals. I wouldn't rush out and buy any drive if it's not on sale, because they're always going on sale and you're going to regret it. And I'd be looking at my budget and saying, what do I actually need, want, and what is my budget, because I need to accommodate my workflow. So, for instance, when you're looking at it in terms of the different drives, the 1 terabyte, the 2 terabyte, and the 4 terabyte, you're seeing a difference in the speeds, very fractional. So I wouldn't worry too much of that aspect. But when you look at other drives, when you get into like the, you know, lower end drives, they are slower than the lower size drives. They are a little bit slower than the bigger size drives. So where this is more equivalent along the way, but make sure you check the speeds before you make a decision when you're moving forward in your purchase. When I'm looking at this now, workflow, okay, this is a great drive. The SN850 is a great drive. What would I be looking at in terms of best like selection here for the average person? If you are looking at it in terms of I want the best and I don't care about budget, you go for
a whole bunch of these. If you are going for something like me, where I'm looking at my budget and going, what do I actually need? And is there a big difference? We saw that the difference 50 being fractional. It's not like it's like game changer. It's not game changer, right? But I wouldn't be mixing and matching. I'd be sticking to one brand so that you can take advantage of the opportunities that come with how the drives work. Unless you're looking at it and going, you know what, I'm going to stick this in the PCI slot and have a faster drive there so you can have another fast drive in my CPU lanes. But with the numbers I showed you, again, it's negligible, negligible. So the thought then becomes, well, what is the best case scenario for anybody here? If you're moving massive data and you're going to be keeping a lot of data on the drives, you might be better off with the SN850. However, if you're looking at it and saying, I'm going to move everything onto here, like with my workflow, and then from here, I'm going to move it over and make a copy to my SN850, load up that to Google. That's what my OneDrive is doing, and that's all it's doing. So I can load that up, and then I can still work off of it, but I'm mainly going to be working off of this drive. However, the idea would be that I'm moving everything onto this drive from my readers, and they're not going to be going past 1.5, sorry, in this current computer, it's not going to go past 10 gigabit speed, but I might get one of those Thunderbolt extensions, and it might go up to 20 gigabit speed. So I'm not going to go past 1100 to 1500 megabytes per second anyway. So I'm not too worried about this drive and the issues that arise when you go past that 2.5 gigabytes per second transfers. So that is something to be thinking about. At the same time, you're going to be looking at it and saying, well, what is the future? Gen 5s are going to be around the corner. How much money do you actually want to spend? And this is something that got me on this drive. So I was like, oh, it's $100 more. And then I'm looking at it and going, well, what happens when the Gen 5s come out? And then at that point, I'm like, how far is that? And what will I be doing with this computer? Now that's one aspect. The other aspect is I need a 4 terabyte. That's what I'm feeling with the Canon R5, and I might be buying the R5C. I need a 4 terabyte. That's what I'm really feeling. But right now it's too expensive. And yes, it's double the price of this. Like, here in Canada, it's like $1,200. But I mean, it's double the price. But at the same time, I'm like, is it what I need right now? It's more of a want. I can work with the 2 terabyte. And at that, if I buy this 2 terabyte and I get another 4 terabyte, later on, now I got 2 of the same types of drives. So this is why I would be going with this. At the same time, maybe we get an SN850 that's 4 terabytes, and then I can make a decision there. But my goal right now is, how soon will I need a 4 terabyte? And it might be that I need it sooner than later. At the same time, I might be hiring somebody, so I'm going to probably be building another rig. And I hope I delay that until the new stuff comes out for the Gen 5. So, I mean, this is where you look at it and you go, where's your money going? Based on your workflow, based on what you need, based on what you want. So some people are just going to go spend the money and do it anyways. But you can see from the data now, based on what's happening, the caching issues exist. They are there compared to the SN850 that doesn't have similar caching issues. We're not seeing the same results. And you got to wonder then, what is best for you based on your workflow? So if I use my workflow the way I'm describing it, caching issues aren't an issue. Done. But if I use it differently, then caching issues will be a difference and a difference maker in this decision, and I'll be going for the SN850 again. So to leave it in short, your goal has to be workflow. And based on what you're doing with your workflow, you need to figure out what's best for you. You take this information, figure out what's best, and then move forward. Are you going to find a massive difference between the speeds and all the specs there? There's a whole bunch of websites out there that are showing different things. I showed you one of them. Go look at all those numbers, see that those are computerized tests where they're running them and going, hey, this is how good this nerdy aspect of a test is, and this is how good the drive is. Okay, great. I'm doing the real world tests here where you're going to experience this. Take both, understand both, so you can make a more educated decision on this. And I know you're going to make the right choice going with either one, SN850 or the Firecuda 530. I think the only thing you're going to regret is thinking about the speed and being like, oh, well, that speed is like hitting these high numbers. But as you can see from everything we showed you, and get that out of your mind. Do not stress about it. It's, there's fractions. It's in real world application. It's fractions. In the future, when the Gen 5 systems come out, maybe that changes and you're going to be using this drive fully, and it's going to change everything because you might have this drive for like 4 or 5 years. I'm buying mine with either this one or the SN850. I'm buying my drives with warranty, which is the last thing I'm going to talk about. I buy my warranty from, I go to a local store here, Canada Computers or Memory Express, and I'm buying the warranty. The warranty is over-the-counter replacement. The reason I'm doing that is because the warranty on this and the Western Digital SN850, it's not like Samsung's. Samsung, if something happens to your drive, you take it back to, you RMA it, and you take it back to where you bought it from. In the case of these guys, I don't even have it in my hand, I'm going like this. In the case of these guys, the idea here is that you would have to ship it to California. And at that, you know, if you're outside, like Canada here, it would cost me, like, with the warranty and the, you know, the specifics of like the overnight kind of thing, delivery, you know, it would be like 3 nights or whatever. But that's going to cost me like 30, 40 bucks. And then I got to pay for shipping. You know, I'm looking at it, I'm like, the warranty is 80 bucks, 20, 25 bucks a year. And I just walk in, walk out. If something was wrong with this, I walk in, walk out. So it's hands down, you know, no issue there. I get the warranty every time. And the other aspect to the warranty is that if you purchase this, there's something wrong, you send it back and they have a refurbished one, they'll send you a refurbished one. So it's not like you're getting a new one. And then the question just begs, like, what's best for you based on your budget, again, and how that all fits the narrative. So a little bit longer of a video than I thought, but I wanted to touch base on all of these things to make a more clear understanding of this type of drive, how it relates to the SN850. I will be making another video on the SN850s. If I do buy this drive, I'll do more tests if I keep it, and I will answer more questions, leave them below, and we can then try to formulate a better understanding for workflow, for creators, what is best as you start to build your computers and or your workflow to figure out how to move forward. I'll be doing another couple videos on how my workflow works now that I've kind of organized it, and the new Google Drive software, how that's working compared to what it was doing before, and that will help you put a more informed decision with everything you're doing to get moving with your business, your creative work, and of course, like, comment, subscribe, and check out these 2 videos.